weekly block of Halloween horror over here at Blood and Black Run Podcast. All season long, September and October will be celebrating with quirky, funny horror parodies. Join us for your favorites, from satirical slashers to classic parodies and even some throwback spooks. I'm even told Abbott and Costello will be rising from the dead. Celebrate with us, Blood and Black Run Podcast, as we dive into HaHaHalloween. Hello, welcome back to the Blood and Black Run Podcast. I'm Ryan from coldsploitation.com, and I'm joined with my co-host Mark.
How's it going?
Oh, it's pretty good. Pretty spooky in here. Spooky funny, I should say. We're continuing HaHaHalloween that we started way back at the beginning of September. And the approach to that has been to cover, horror parodies, horror comedies, just anything in between, It could be just a meta film, could be, actually striving to be funny, and we're kind of covering everything here and there. We've already covered things like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. We're going to be covering some of the more well-recognized horror parodies in the coming weeks. But today, we are actually returning to another in the style of sort of slasher meta-commentary kind of, comedy elements that we had started with Tucker and Dale versus Evil and Club Dread, which, again, we kind of took a break from that in the last episode with The Dead Don't Die to cover something more zombie-esque, to get away from the slasher element. But here we are returning right back to it, which is actually kind of, I would say a large amount of horror parodies actually center around slashers to some extent. It's kind of the American horror film of note for horror, basically. And for today's episode, we're covering one that we actually have not done very many in this style, which is the mockumentary style. And I'll let you, as the historian, which one? What
archivist and curator?
What'd you say?
I was gonna say the curator and archivist of the show.
Absolutely. Have we done any sort of like found footage mockumentary style films? I can't even think back.
Well, we've done the found footage. We've done Creep.
Oh yes, that's right. Yep.
And we've done, you should know this, the mockumentary documentary. You should know that one. It's one of your favorite movies.
Yes. Right, the WNUF Halloween special.
Yeah.
I think is the one. Yes.
Oh,
which is funny because I actually don't really think of that one as like found footage, but it is. It's like...
But it's a mockumentary.
Yeah, it's a mockumentary. That's definitely for sure. Yeah, that's true. So we did that one. We haven't done some of like the major styles in that, or films in that style though. Like the Blair Witch Project we haven't done. It's kind of surprising.
Well, I would be fine if we eventually tap that but I am not going down the paranormal activity rabbit hole.
You don't want to do that one because that one was another big series that came out like Saw in the Halloween season, right? So like every year, just like Saw, they tried to do like another paranormal activity for a little while. It didn't have the staying power of Saw, but I do remember that. And that was actually one that I never really got into like seeing on a yearly basis. I think I've only actually seen the first one in that series.
Same. I've only seen the first one. And,
yeah.
I don't know. It's like The Purge. It's like, how is this like a
lasting
franchise that people are still like, every year that, that it's diminishing returns. Less and less people show up to the theater to see it, but there's at least a couple enough to keep the lights on.
Yeah, well, I guess, and I think at a certain point, like you said, that did run its course, because we have not really seen, Paranormal Activity releasing anytime recently, and I think it kind of ran its course and fell off.
Now you just gave some dickhead producer an idea.
Yeah, bring it back.
Hey, we haven't done a Paranormal Activity in 3 years, because that's what they do with Saw now. It's just...
Bring it back. We haven't done it in a while. Bring it back. Yeah. But so anyway, like I said, we haven't done very many of those types of styles, but the one that we're doing today is, kind of a, I don't want to say it's an unknown film, but it's not super highly recognized in the horror sphere, but at the same time, did have a pretty cult following, especially among slasher fans, and at a particular time when it came out, it certainly did quite well for itself with, home video and people recognizing that it was something a little bit different from the usual slasher film or the meta commentary. And again, it was during a time of many different found footage style films. So, again, it's not like this film was a banner poster child for like the, starting the found footage movement, but it is a kind of a unique experience in that regard. One that was kind of replicated, I think it was just last year, with that other slasher movie that came out that was like from the perspective of the killer, it was like a found footage film in the perspective of the killer, which the name is escaping me. I didn't end up seeing it, but I think it came out last year.
Thanksgiving.
No, not that one.
My bad. I thought it was.
I'm sure if I look it up, I will be able to find it fairly quickly. But again, like I said, the name is escaping me at this point. But yeah, I think it just came out last year. And so for this one, we're doing Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is a 2006, I think it was.
Yes.
Am I right? Yes, I am right. Sorry, I'm just doing the quick check right now. 2006 film, which, again, as we kind of talked about when we did Tucker and Dale, movie kind of wears its 2000s elements on its sleeve a little bit. All of these movies, I feel like, from the 2000s have like this very much particular trademark or stamp on them that feels like a 2000s movie. I don't know if you agree, but they have a very particular feel, a very specific way of like direction and filming. I don't know, especially slasher films of this time.
Well, our protagonist, his facial hair choice could only exist within 2003 to 2007. Right, just
that little tiny little soul patch going on.
Yeah.
Behind the Mask.
I've never even heard of it. Sure. I thought it was maybe like how Jim Carrey really got into the role of the Mask.
the documentary behind Jim Carrey's The Mask.
Or because it's from 2006, Unfortunately, Son of Mask came out around that time too,
What movie?
Son of Mask.
That doesn't exist.
Thank you.
Alternate reality.
Thank you for acknowledging.
Yeah.
But no, I had no idea what this was. You just said for this week, I'd like to do this. It's pretty fun. And that's it. And after looking at the Wikipedia, it's kind of reasonable why the hell this has never been on my radar. So
yeah, like I was saying, it's not particularly unknown. Like if horror fans, they probably would have heard of Behind the Mask for the most part, but it's not like super recognized. It did get a fairly wide release, especially with Scream Factory doing the Blu-ray probably, I don't know, like 8 years ago, I think it came out, something like that. They released the Blu-ray of it. I think there was at one point a pretty significant call to have like a sequel film or even a prequel film of this movie to kind of try to cement Leslie Vernon as sort of a, you know, slasher staple, kind of like the film depicts him, you know, in the movie, and kind of a play on the rest of the slasher cast of characters that you think of when you think of like the main monsters. And that never came to fruition. For whatever reason, there was never a sequel made to this movie. But again, it had a number of fans, really. And I think at the time when Scream Factory released this on Blu-ray, there was a lot of people that were actually very excited because this movie did not get like super wide release, and I believe it just released to direct to video, and you know, kind of, it was sort of like one of those Anchor Bay movies where people, you know, you might see it in the video store, but you didn't really think much of it because a lot of times those types of Anchor Bay movies were kind of shitty, for lack of a better word. They were very low budget and not really worth your time. And so I think that kind of was part of the problem with Behind the Mask. But again, this movie does have quite a number of names of note too, besides the fact that, like, you know, its main cast is kind of unknown, but at the same time it does pull in a number of actual horror franchise icons. Like Robert Englund's in here really quickly, probably was only on set for like a day, but he's here, you know, blink and you'll miss him in most scenes. He wasn't
even asked, you know, he didn't try out or anything. He was just vacationing up in Oregon, and, like, you know, someone's like, dude, there's Robert Englund.
Either that or
like, hey, you want
a horror convention, and they just pulled him aside and said, hey, we're shooting this movie. It'd be great to have you in it for 5 minutes. And he was like, sure.
And he's like, as long as you pay for my stack of, you know, flapjacks, because they probably ran into him
stack of flapjacks.
Because he ran into him. Ran into him at a nice hurry diner, and he's like, pay for my flapjacks and coffee, and you have a deal.
Damn right.
Because again, this movie like was made on a $70,000 budget.
Yeah,
even under. It's got it down to what the hell? $69,136.
So the accountant was really working overtime there.
Oh yeah, to like get every penny. Like,
yeah. The producers want to know who bought that, you know, McDonald's burger there.
I mean, to be fair, back then, like a snack wrap cost 50 cents. Well, you could get like 20 snack wraps for this 10-man crew, you know, and
absolutely,
it's like catering, like
had it down to the dollar. Yeah. So I mean, it was definitely low budget. You could tell, like when you're watching it, that you could tell like it's shot on a fairly low budget. Not in a bad way. Just saying, like, you could tell based on the environments and the you know, the how it's shot and the documentary style, the found footage. A lot of times found footage, especially in these low budget features, it's kind of used not so much as a way to tell the story sometimes, but as a way to like actually produce the movie. It's like, it'll be much cheaper if we just call this found footage. We're shooting on a handheld camera. You know, that's a lot cheaper than having to buy the film and, you know, edit it and all that stuff. So, but it not only does it have Robert Englund, again, who probably was just at a horror convention and asked to do it, and he agreed to it because he did that sort of thing, especially you know, back in the 2000s. Just like Kane Hodder is in here too. Really quick, blink and you'll miss him. You know, Jason from a couple of the Friday 13ths. Again, he's really quick, like cameo at the beginning, but he's here, and Zelda Rubinstein as well from Poltergeist is here for like a couple scenes too. So it's kind of cool to see those, you know, those people come to this movie and kind of lend it their name for the low budget element that it, you know, that it offers. So, before we take a break to talk about the beer, anything else you wanted to say about in the intro before we move on?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. It's
yeah,
the little mockumentary that could.
That's right. And and I've seen this a couple times, just to put that out there. This is my pick, and I thought it would be kind of a fun one to do. So I've seen it a couple times. This is probably my third or fourth time seeing it. I have it Blu-ray and all that stuff. All right, let's talk about the beer that we got today. It's kind of a special one. I think we've talked about this. We've talked between us about trying this beer numerous times. We just never have before. For whatever reason, just never picked it up. It's kind of expensive for what it is. So it's something that we just probably have never thought about getting. But I was in the store and I saw it and I was like, you know what? That's probably interesting. It would also, to the point that my son made me go into the store. All he wanted to do was go into the cooler. That's it. And I actually had no intention of buying any beer when I was going to the store. But I do feel weird about walking in, seeing the guy that I know at the store, and then being like, "Sorry, I'm heading out," and I didn't feel like anything today.
And you're not wrong.
It's awkward.
It's the same way over here. Like, if you walk into the store and it's like, "How you doing today?" And it's like, "Oh, I got to walk out or something."
Yeah, it's kind of the feeling that I got. So, I saw this in the cooler, and I was like, you know what? That's actually pretty cool. I think I might grab that and just give that a try finally. Is a 6-pack for a not terrible price. So I grabbed it. Really interested in giving it a try. It's the Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, their American barley wine style that they put out every year. It's kind of put out with fanfare. It's sort of like their, stout of the year type thing that other breweries do. They do the Narwhal Stout and they do the Bigfoot barley wine, and they do those each year, and they specifically label them the year that they are because, again, they can have slight variations in their flavor and recipe every year. We have never had a barley wine on this show. I've had a couple of barley wines. I've tried a couple, not full drinks, but I've had samples of some. And I've had a couple of actual barley wines that I've drank. But how much have you had of barley wine?
As far as I know, none. I would literally have to scrounge through Untapped to if I've checked into one.
And I can also say that I don't have I've never really had a great understanding of what a barley wine is, except for the fact that it's obviously, it's not wine. It is a beer. It's an ale. It's called a barley wine because of the high alcohol percentage on it that they generally have. 9 to 12 is, I think, normally where they fall into. And I guess the idea now is that the barley wine flavors have kind of broken off. There's the traditional, English style barley wine, and then there's as we always do, there's an American style barley wine where we're like, you know what? Fuck those English. We have our own way of making this beer. We're just going to do that instead. So Sierra Nevada's is obviously the American style, which this is news to me because I've never had an American style barley wine. But apparently it is just basically hop to shit and heavily malted with caramely toffee style malts.
Do you think it's hop to shit just because it's Sierra Nevada and that's why it's it's an American style?
Not from what I've seen about American barley wines. It seems like that's the prevalence of most American style barley wines is to excessively hop them. So I think that's the I don't know if that's Sierra Nevada's standard. If they started that tradition, I'm not sure. Did Bigfoot actually start what would be considered the American barley wine movement? I don't know. I don't really know the backstory of that too well. Because again, this is my first American barley wine style. I've never really had any others to compare it to. In this case, though, I really enjoy this Bigfoot. Again, this is one of those beers that if you are really big into the extremely hoppy IBU, high IBU Imperial IPAs, I think you would pretty much gravitate to the Bigfoot style barley wine because it's pretty much how it is. It's kind of just an extension of an Imperial IPA and maybe just hopped even a bit further. a little bit more of like that toffee caramel note with the malts to kind of give it like a malty body. And that's kind of what it reminds me of, is like an excessive imperial, like a double imperial IPA or something like that is kind of like the idea that I would float to most people who don't know what a barley wine is. And I think it's actually, it's pretty good. It's from Sierra Nevada. Obviously, Sierra Nevada makes really good imperial IPAs, like West Coast style IPAs. I've never really had a bad imperial IPA from them. I think this Bigfoot, it kind of solidifies that they do that very well. They kind of sit in that wheelhouse and they do it really well. Another thing that this reminds me of is an ESB, the extra special bitter, which it is definitely a bit hoppier than what you would normally get from an extra special bitter. But it kind of has that like red IPA maltiness, carameliness to it that reminds me of an extra special bitter. So I think it sits in that kind of interesting place between an Imperial IPA and an ESB. I think it works really well. I like it quite a bit. I would definitely get this again. I would try it again next year. I think it has a high alcohol content, and that's on purpose. So you definitely do taste the alcohol content in it. So that can be kind of off-putting for some people if they don't really like that heavy alcohol taste. But overall, I really like this beer. I would definitely get it again. How about you?
Yeah, it's not bad at all. I'm pleasantly surprised by. I was expecting it to be like a strong ale, very just alcohol heat forward, and that's kind of it. Maybe some very dried fruits like figs, plums, and raisins, and it's not there, thank God. So it's definitely hoppy. Like I said, wasn't expecting that. It's like a cross between a Sierra Nevada double IPA and something that's like, as you said, an ESB would be a good comparison, because you definitely get get the breadiness of that caramelized malt at first, and then it goes into the big hop flavors, because they do have Chinook and Cascade in there, so it's very bold. And then it's rounded off with a pretty strong alcohol taste. It's not too off-putting for me, but it kind of just rounds it out. It's not bad. Would I ever go out of my way for this type of beer? No. But it is, I think, for a, January, February, December beer, yeah, something to keep you warm. Yeah, fine, But I would say try it if you've never tried the style before, and it makes me want to try more barley wines, be a little bit more adventurous with that style. But I overall, even though it's okay, I would say it's nothing that's for me personally.
Good to know. All right, so let's talk Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Again, this is a film that has that mockumentary element of found footage style, and it pairs that with a slasher aesthetic and sort of the meta commentary that could be found in something like Scream, where it kind of tries to comment on the common slasher tropes. And then I think it goes even a step further into trying to psychologize why those things are a part of the meta of slasher films, which I think is kind of interesting. I think that's if Scream basically tried to depict the meta commentary behind the choices that its characters make and sort of nitpick the idea behind the slasher format, then Behind the Mask takes that a step further, and it sort of, from the killer's perspective, takes a look at their choices and why a slasher film is sort of might be designed the way it's designed, right? So a lot of the killer's choices, a lot of the motive behind it, this film kind of takes a stab at parodying that and trying to identify what the killer is doing in those movies, like behind the scenes, basically. Like you're getting a little look literally behind the scenes of what the slasher is actually doing. And I think that that's pretty clever. I think that, Scott Glosserman does a pretty good job of setting this up at the beginning of the film, because about the first 45 minutes or so is, basically just a sit down with the film's main slasher character, Leslie Vernon, as a documentary crew kind of interviews him about his upcoming, particular massacre that he's about to be partaking in. What did you think about that whole idea of setting it as a documentary?
I think it's really cool. Especially because I was expecting at first it to be kind of just what's this guy, what's he doing, and he's kind of crazy and weird. But the movie sets up from the beginning that these, famous, slasher heroes are real. Mm-hmm. And it's part of society and part of the culture and part of reality. So this makes the whole idea of behind the mask, of the Rise of Leslie Vernon, that's a cool idea. This is a world that has known sociopath killers. Okay. Here's a guy that's on the up and up, and he's gonna, take you around and show you what he's doing, how it all works, and all the things that you'd probably be asking when you're watching, a slasher film. Be like, why are you running there, you dumb bitch? He's got all the answers for you. So I think that's a fun, nifty, smart idea. They get a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sets it up at the beginning. You have this documentary crew led by Angela Gothel's character. She's basically looking to interview this guy who's going to be doing this, these series of killings. She's kind of interested in the psychology behind a slasher. And I think the beginning of the film really sets up the fact that, all of the other serial killers that we know of, Freddy, Jason, Michael, they all exist in this universe. They all exist in this universe, and everybody knows about them. It's kind of like the proliferation of serial killers throughout the ages. And so the film kind of asks, in that universe where they all exist, there would probably be some people who are like, why the fuck is this why does this happen so often that we have this legacy of serial killers returning to these crimes every year and not caught. And I think that's kind of the idea behind the documentary, is that she's taken this on and said well, let's go interview somebody who can really answer that question of why would you do such a thing? What is making this occur? And it's a smart idea, I think. First of all, we talked about this in The Dead Don't Die too, to set it in a universe where people acknowledge and recognize that stuff like Halloween and Friday the 13th are known. The same idea with zombies, where people, in a lot of zombie movies are like, zombies? What is that? Never heard of such a thing. The dead rising from the grave? I don't know what you're talking about.
They're called gibbly gobbly woobly wobbers. Yeah.
Yeah, we've just never had that thought before that might happen. And so I like the fact that this movie is kind of tongue in cheek, just takes those at heart and says, okay, yes, all these things, even Chucky, which I think is funny, because Leslie brings that up at one point. They're even, talk about Chucky. Even Chucky exists in this universe of somewhat supernatural serial killers. And so I think that's kind of a smart idea to take it at face value. And so it makes sense then that they have this documentary crew, and they're a young crew. It's kind of almost like a school project sort of thing that she's taking on of, documenting the serial killing. And I think it brings up a pretty interesting point throughout this film about journalism as well, especially in this scenario, where it's where's the line where it's too far, where you're, at some point you're implicated in this as well. You're not just an innocent bystander who's like, we're just, we didn't plan the murders. We've just been documenting all of the murders and all of these things. We tagged along for the ride, but we didn't do any of it. And so there's kind of that idea at play too with the journalism aspect of like, where's the line of like being in the war zone, basically? Like, when is it too much and you should actually not be filming all of the events that are happening? Or are you egging them on too? Which I think, is an interesting aspect that doesn't maybe get as much screen time as it should, or it maybe would be advised, but I still think it's like a kind of a cool idea behind the whole aspect of journalism here too. But yeah, I think the really interesting part of this movie for me is like just the first probably 40 minutes where we just sit down and kind of go over in a documentary style the questions that people would have about, how a slasher killer would go about the process of setting things up. Because there, when you think about slasher movies, there's a lot of actual setup involved in the reality of the film. So a good example of that is like the actual posing of the bodies, right? Like in every good slasher film, there's a moment where the protagonist or protagonists stumble upon just the posed bodies of all of their friends, strung up and displayed for them to find strategically. And I think Behind the Mask kind of goes into that a little bit, where Leslie Vernon gives his input or opinion on why he does what he does, which I think works really well for this movie too, because I don't know about if you felt the same way, but it's just kind of nice to like see the film try to answer some of those questions that you might have when watching a slasher film, where it's like, oh, that doesn't seem realistic. Obviously you kind of tune out the realism in slasher films and horror movies. You're not always working in like a logical world, but it's nice to have them try to explain those in a way that makes sense in the reality of the film. I don't know if you felt the same way, but
yeah, no, I think that, like I said, they get a lot of mileage on it, and I think it's a terrific idea because it makes what they're doing making this documentary, trying to find out, like, oh, here's another guy that's trying to make it on his own as a serial killer, Leslie Vernon. It gives it makes you, pay attention to what's actually going on. And it's just like, I think a really, fun, because again, they're supposed to be college students, right?
Yeah, I think
they're
so.
making it.
Yeah.
So they got like, the electric camcorder, and they're sitting there, and following him around, and they're like, he's like, this is where I would do this, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, so it's like I said, it's a really fun idea. Pleasantly surprised with how much fun I thought, the idea, after, things started going, it had me. The film,
sure. I think that's partially too, like Nathan Basil, I think is how you say his name, or
yes.
Basil. He has a nice rapport as well. Like he just is very. He's a perfect person for that role in Leslie Vernon.
Are we sure that's his name?
What? Basil?
Is that not a pseudonym?
Because
I think that's Glenn Howerton.
yeah. Kind of does look similar.
Well, not only that, but the whole psychopathic, Dennis things that they that Dennis does, and It's Always Sunny as the seasons roll on and on. Right up there, it's
yeah. I think
it could easily be Dennis, the Golden God.
He has a really, I think, just very leisurely, friendly composure to him. that is kind of offset later on by this, the whole, he's also a serial killer type thing, which works really well because, again, it's really inviting to the audience. A perfect embodiment of like a person that you would think of as sort of a sociopath who can pretend to be emotionally invested and very, friendly and enamored, and then at the same time be completely aloof and psychotic later on when he's actually murdering people. And, he does a great job. I think it's a lot of the film's success is creditable to him as being just, a person who can hold the audience and be invested with this character, even though he's about to do some, heinous acts throughout. And not only that too, but the glee, the overall glee that he has throughout the movie, like when he gets excited in the library and he's kind of like giddy, and he's like, we're just gonna do this. It's almost like if you don't know what he's actually gonna do as like a serial killer, you might think like, oh, he's just like really good at being like a guy who runs a haunted house or something. Like he could do a very good haunted house and scare a lot of people, but instead he's murdering people instead. But I think he's like really one of the main draws, and I think also Angela Gothos does a good job in the other side of things, where that being the very like sheepish and naive, documentary journalist, Diane Sawyer stand-in, with the really kind of frumpy sweaters and stuff that she wears throughout, or like the gloves that she's got on. I think I was thinking more like Barbara Walters. I was expecting her back. Barbara Walters. Or like, it kind of reminds me of like a Sally Jesse Raphael type thing too. I don't know, just I do think she does a good job, because again, part of the charm of that is to kind of cement the idea, especially later on, that she has been the target the whole time, because she is that naive, virginal type character that Leslie has been talking about the entire time. I think that, again too, with the red hair, that's another sort of giveaway of like, redheads, and evil, they go together. So, and I think that both of those, they do a really good job. They have a good rapport with each other, a nice relationship, almost sort of like there's like sort of like this flirtatious relationship going on between them as well, where it's sort of like she's kind of enamored with him, but then also recognizes that like the things that he's doing are, very, amoral. And so there's that kind of give and take between them. I think that works really well, and it kind of like facilitates the whole film. One question I do have for you though is, what do you think about Scott Wilson being here as Eugene, who is like this retired serial killer who's kind of gotten away with it, and he's supposedly like the best in class besides the main guys like Michael and Freddie. And
again, I love it, and I think it gives the film a lot of fun elements too, because again, we're living in a world where like these killers are the norm, and when like they first go to their house, and you see he's got a lovely wife wearing like apron, like, oh, come on in, like, oh yeah, he's out in his like his hyperbolic chamber out the backyard. Like, what? And they start talking to him, and he's like, oh yeah, back in the day, it was about just hitting as many people and running away. Yeah, it wasn't about the gore and stuff, which gives me like a very Charles Manson and the guy from Black Christmas vibes.
Yeah, Billy Bob.
Because he talks about the wiping out a sorority.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that and it's fun. That's a nifty little idea, like, because seeing Leslie have like somebody's like, oh, like what should I do? Oh, you should do this. Should I was thinking about taking that person out. No. You don't want to take them out because it's too close to them. Too much heat. what do they like to do? Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's like, it's just fun. It's just a really, fun idea, and really that whole bit in their house is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it works really well to have Scott Wilson here as sort of like a veteran as well. It just makes sense.
Cooking kielbasa on the grill.
Yeah, man, it looks
big. Everyone's got big, they got a nut. Who's eating all that?
Well, I do love too that they just show Leslie just eating it straight, just a piece of kielbasa in his hand. He's just chomping away at it, which is, again, I do like a kielbasa on a hot dog roll, but at the same time, I can appreciate just going to town on a full dog like that. I can appreciate it both ways. So I like that. I like that little inclusion. And I think they're drinking Sierra Nevada as well, if I'm not mistaken. I
wink, wink,
do believe I saw that green label of the pale ale on there. They do a pretty good job of hiding that because it's, they're not sponsored or anything. So and again, like you said, this film is exceedingly low budgeted. Again, too, with the low budget thing, you can kind of see that because the film has really limited amounts of set pieces. One of the things it looks like is they literally just filmed in an abandoned house, or an abandoned barn. And so I think that all works to the film's advantage, though, because it does just feel very aesthetically real. Probably because of the way that it's just not budgeted. They didn't have to design this place. It was just the way that it is, and they used it. So I really like that too. The whole feel of the movie works really well. Now, I did want to ask you, this film, for a good portion of it is documentary style footage, but at times it does shift away from that and go more into a strategically actually directed and filmed and edited version of events, almost like in most documentaries that would be called something like a depiction, right? They would say oh, this is a stylized version of events and we've depicted it for you, but this film doesn't really call that out. It kind of just plays it straight. What do you think about that, the switch between documentary and actual events happening?
I'm fine with it, especially because for the most part, that doesn't there's parts in the beginning where that happens, but mainly it's the third act where that changes. So after an hour in this 90-minute film, they switch from the documentary to an actual traditional slasher because of the reasons within the film. I'm fine with it because, again, I think it's playing out how it wants to, and it's fun. It keeps you on your toes and fun. So yeah.
I mean, I like it. I feel like I kind of am torn. Like I said, I've seen this a few times now. I don't remember feeling this way the last couple times I watched this movie, but this time I was just kind of thinking it is a little bit strange to me that there's no there's no reasoning given. It's just kind of played out that way, that we see the documentary and then we see the events play out. And it kind of would make sense if it was all played straight as though we were watching this as a documentary and then they kind of said these are fictionalized versions of the events displayed or something like that. I guess I can understand both ways, because then as the viewer you would feel even further taken out of the events that are being portrayed, right? So the fear that the film is attempting to conjure, even though this is sort of a horror comedy, I feel like maybe you would lose some of that by saying these are depictions of the events. So I can see both ways. I think at the end of the day, I'm fine with it kind of switching away from that documentary style. But I did want to ask you too, how do you feel about this, the actual slasher elements in this movie? Do you think that it works well? Because it tries to circumvent some of the ideas of a normal slasher film. And again, too, it sets up Leslie Vernon's whole plan, because he pretty much gives, basic basic directions of like, I'm going to do this, and then this is going to cause this, and then I will do this. And then during the course of that, with the documentary crew interfering, it changes the whole plan. What did you think about that? Like, did you respect the slasher aesthetic as it plays out seriously?
Yeah, no, because I think it's like, again, like it's like very much like Scream, where it's like, okay, here's the meta-contextual part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fine with it. Like, and I think the slasher and like how they were kind of interacting with it as like a final third act for a slasher film, I think it works fine, and it's, enjoyable enough, and it does have like the funny twist, like where our virgin is not the pure virgin, she's fucking riding some guy's dick reverse cowgirl into like dust. That poor boys, I hope they had lube.
Yeah.
But like I agree. Like, I would have liked to see like the film finish on that and like keep going with that idea of the, documentary. But I understand why it abandons it and kind of leans more into the meta-contextual aspects. Either way, it's still fun. And if you're looking for like gory, fun slasher kills, they're not here. It's the jokes that matter. And again, the film was made on a $70,000 budget, so you can understand why. It was the effects and budget did not go to that.
Right, and I think it does a pretty good job. I like the whole idea of Leslie sabotaging the weapons that kind of comes out later on in the film. Of like,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
When he's like, oh yeah, I'll lead him into the shed. Well, what happens? Well, I already cut that axe in half. So after a swing, it's gonna fall apart. And I took made that sledgehammer had loose and doled down that pickaxe. So
it's like sort of that idea of like trying to explain the more outrageous elements of a slasher film of like, why did that happen? Why did this person have such bad luck? It was like, no, it wasn't bad luck. It was because the killer was thinking, 13 steps ahead. Of like, they'll run into the shed and I will sabotage all the weapons. And then,
Can you imagine fucking Michael Myers sitting there like, just sitting there whittling away? Like,
I know. Getting everything prepared. He's like, Halloween is not the night that he came home. It was like 15 days prior where he had to get everything ready. I also like the whole like kind of bit about him having to do all the calisthenics and get all of his aerobics in, because he has to be able to walk very fast and keep up with running people. I think that's great too. Of just like a play on that idea of like the killer keeps walking and they keep getting closer even though I'm sprinting away from them. It's really great. It kind of does a really does a good job with it, infusing all of that. What do you think about Robert Englund here playing like the Dr. Loomis character who just kind of shows up randomly throughout?
Love it. What an inspired, beautiful idea. Especially because like, how do you defeat evil? Michael! Poor Donald Pleasance is long gone from this ethereal plane. So, what the hell were you doing, Rob Zombie? You could have had Robert Englund as, Dr. Loomis instead of Sir Malcolm McDowell, who is a terrific actor who does it for everything, for the love of the game.
I would say that, basically Robert Englund does a really good job of supplementing as Donald Pleasance here.
Yes.
He looks the part. He's basically.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
You want to talk to them.
I love that whole library sequence too, where he like just starts shooting in the library,
it's
like almost hitting, the final girl there, and then Leslie standing up on like the balcony. It's like kind of like framed like a deer in the headlights, and he's shooting at him. It's a great moment. But
I do love too the fact that he hits him, he gets shot, and then when they get back to like how was it? oh man, I got shot. Are you okay? Yeah, man, we're all with the plan. Like, it's like really funny.
I think like it's overall very effective, and again, just does a great job of cementing that meta commentary that it exists in sort of this weird universe where all of these things come together. I think having Zelda Rubinstein here too, as like the sort of stand-in Tangina character who just is spouting ridiculous exposition, which is kind of the joke of it all too, is like there's this one librarian in the library who like knows everything about the backstory of this serial killer that just gives it all to the main character. It is really good too, because she, again, she had this great voice and aesthetic that just made her a really powerful character for Poltergeist, and so it makes sense to use that here too. It's again like a masterful decision. Now there's a lot of movies that are like Behind the Mask where they are low budget, made by people who obviously love horror movies, and they basically just try to get anybody who's anybody who will be in the movie. But here, it actually feels like Scott Glosserman was making specific decisions of who to involve in this movie, rather than just going to like a horror convention and asking anybody who was there, like, oh, you were in a horror movie, you want to be in our movie? This was actually like sort of inspired casting, in my opinion, and not just like random, I'll ask this person. So I think that works well as how they did it. One of the other things I like too is when they show Leslie actually suiting up, and they kind of go over the fact that he's putting on like this cream underneath his mask. It's like fire retardant and like heals, or like supposed to like make it so your blood vessels are like constricted so you don't bleed as much and stuff, to kind of make sense of the fact that like killers can be wounded multiple times and still come back.
That nice Prep H blend he's got.
Preparation H blend constricts the blood vessels. Yeah.
And he's like, and I have my own fire retardant.
It's my own concoction. And I guess one of the other things I wanted to ask is, so do you think that the slasher element towards the end for like the last 30 minutes or so, does it run on too long? Because it does have that element of like bringing the killer back again and again when you think he's dead. Does it run too long, or is it just enough?
No, it goes too long. I think the film would have been better if it let that last third of the film, the last part of it being like that, if it was more like 20 to 15 minutes instead of 30 minutes, and more of the documentary leading up to it, because it does linger on for too long, like the constant like, oh, Kelly the Virgin, Kelly, what are we gonna do about Kelly? Oh, Kelly, like 10 minutes is dedicated to that, and it's boring, which is sad, because I think Leslie in his serial killer garb, he looks great, overalls, the mask, like being a frown, it's like a great little look. He looks like like he could beat the shit out of any of those remakes that came out in the mid-2000s. So, but I think it does definitely overstay its welcome. I get what they're going for with like moving away from that mockumentary style to like, oh, now we're in it, and like it being, very meta. It just goes on for too damn long, though.
I agree. That's kind of why the reason I asked. I do think it goes on just a little bit too long. I think this could have been a pretty successful film, cut down even to like an hour and 15 minutes, because I do think that the actual full extent of it wears thin after a while. I think that it maybe, could have used just a little bit of editing here and there, especially the actual slasher format towards the end could have been cut down just a bit, where it wouldn't have felt so long-winded, and that would have been like a perfect runtime for this movie. As it stands, like I still think it's fine. at 90 minutes, but maybe just runs a little bit too long at the end and kind of overplays the slasher formula to its extent. Anything else that I'd bring up here that you want to talk about?
I think that's about it.
Okay. So on a scale of 0 to 10, explicit and outrageous panty shots, absurd shots, as though this is an anime, an ecchi anime.
Oh no!
I think it's like 3 or 4 times that we get
yeah, it does.
shot in here.
Listen, she's wearing Ugg boots, so she deserves it.
There you go. What would you give Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon?
I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's God bless the movie. It's like kind of like the little engine that could. Really should be more well known. Maybe, again, because you're in the horror community, that, you know it as what it is. But I think it should be like, this should be something that's like, more talked about and more, regarded. Because again, it's a lot of fun. It's got some nice, fun ideas. It's head and shoulders above the slasher shit that was coming out in the 2000s. Even as a mockumentary, it's like, terrifically fun to watch. And if you're somebody who likes, tongue-in-cheek, fourth wall breaking humor, it's right up your alley. Check it out. So 7 out of 10. I liked it a lot. And Robert Englund, as Dr. Loomis, hilarious. He may be in the movie for 6 minutes, but still hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, wonderful.
I like this movie a lot as well. I would probably give it a 7 out of 10. I think I agree with that. I think that overall it's very effective. Mockumentary style compared with the sort of slasher meta commentary seems to work really well here. The aesthetic I think is really good for Halloween as well, which we didn't really talk about, but I think the overall fall kind of aesthetic that we see in the background, all of the leaves, and it sort of almost looks like could be an October-November sort of situation in this movie. It all works really well. Sets up a nice mood to it, which this film kind of straddles the line between being a comedy and then just kind of going towards its more horror sensibilities. It kind of has both at times, so I think that's a benefit to it as well, that you can kind of watch it both ways. But I do think that the film can be quite funny when it comments on some of the elements of an actual slasher film and how the killers act in those movies. I think the main characters do a really good job and play off of each other really well. And overall, I think it's just a really fun movie to watch and kind of enjoy the aesthetics that it brings and the slasher elements that it kind of toys with and tries to play up and then circumvent. And it's pretty smart about how it does that. So I think for those looking for a movie that's not Scream with meta commentary, this isn't a good one. This is a good one to try, especially if you haven't seen it before, because I do think that it is really under recognized. Maybe people in the horror community know it a little bit better, but for most people, it's probably gone under the radar. So definitely check it out. I think it's definitely worth a watch for most people, especially if you enjoy slasher type movies. All right, so that's our episode on Behind the Mask. Next week, I think we're going to try to go in a little bit of a different direction than we've done so far. I think it's time to include the film classic that we wanted to do. Might be that time, because I've been saving some of the other ones, which are definitely more Halloween oriented, as we get into the Halloween season. So I think now is the time to do the classic. And classic parody, I think probably should give it away, but definitely interested in doing this and checking it out. And it would be definitely a different kind of episode for us, because we don't actually do that many very old movies.
That's right.
I don't think we've done many from this time period. So it will be a fun new excursion for us. It's not like we haven't seen movies from that time period, but we just haven't covered them on the show. So. All right, well, thanks for listening to our episode. Hope you're enjoying your Halloween season. If you want to continue with our HaHaHalloween, you should subscribe to us on pretty much any podcast app that you can think of. We're on Apple Podcasts, our home base at Spotify, whatever you use. I'm sure we're on it. Subscribe to us, leave us a nice review. We are on Facebook and Blue Sky. You can search for us on there, Blood and Black Rum Podcast. Like us and all that jazz. You can write to us at bloodandblackrumpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what movies you want us to cover. We'll keep that in mind. And you can also donate to us on Patreon or our Spotify page. Anything you donate goes back towards beer, so we appreciate that in advance. Again, thanks for listening. Hope you're enjoying HaHaHalloween. Write to us, let us know what you think about it. We'll be back next week with another episode of a classic parody. And until then,
take care.